Thank you to everybody who's made the time to come today, and for those of you who are watching the recording later. Just double checking, can you all see that slide okay? Is that good?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So today's talk is about how AI might impact us as freelancers and whether it will be impacting us in a positive way as a friend or if it will be kind of risking jobs as a foe. So throughout the talk, what I'm going to do is kind of to get everybody on the same page, just do a very quick run through of how generative AI works, how people can start learning the tools and the ways that people are already using it or might be using it moving into the future. And then we will switch the discussion to kind of more hypothetical things that I looked into in my research, such as the emerging ethical considerations, this internal v external philosophy that I've kind of developed, and then conclude all those arguments with a holistic approach. And then what we'll do is we'll open the room to some questions at the end. If you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat throughout, but I won't be covering the questions until the very end. So just be patient and wait for the Q&A. So a quick rundown of who I am and why I'm covering this topic. I'm a freelance director and production manager. I work with fashion brands. I work in sport. I've recently worked in music, and I have directed short films and feature-length films independently. So like yourselves, I work as a freelancer. I was very concerned about this kind of emerging topic of AI and how that might impact my freelance world and my friends. And that kind of inspired me to create this Lights, Camera, AI film report, which I began in 2022, shortly after the public release of ChatGPT. This was completed towards the start of 2023, looking at kind of how the general public had adapted to this product that had been launched and the explosion of discussion online. And I just really wanted to, primarily for people I work with and for myself, figure out the lay of the land and, you know, whether the hype bubble is real or if it is just a bubble that's going to burst. So the initial report focused specifically on the film and TV industries, which is where I work within. But for this talk, after I spoke with Eva, we opened up the discussion to look wider than the film industries, still primarily with a focus on the creative, but I will touch on some businesses who have employed AI and how that's affected their business standpoints. If you want to do further reading, some of the slides have the sources that I've used at the bottom. I recommend you read those reports. They are very insightful and they cover things in far more depth than we will have time to go into today. So to begin, what is generative AI? So generative AI is an AI that functions on existing content being pulled together and then using this prediction algorithm to generate something that is quote unquote new out of that material. So an example of a generative AI would be something like ChatGPT, where you can ask it a question or give it a prompt, and then it will return something that is different to the text you gave it, that appears to be brand new. Those kind of generative AI are called large language models. And as I said, the most common one that people have come into contact with in the public is ChatGPT, which is now on its fourth iteration or in its fourth phase behind a paywall, but there is still the free version that you can go and get your hands on today. I just wanted to cover quickly that it is important to distinguish generative AI tools from algorithms. I think at the moment with this kind of AI hype bubble, a lot of companies and tools are putting AI onto their products and not necessarily always fulfilling the description that we'll cover. So there's like things that can optimize your calendar or do spell check better. These don't necessarily always function generatively, so we won't be discussing those today. These function kind of much more similarly to a traditional spell check function that you might find on Word. Generative AI doesn't just have to be text. We are seeing tools that have come out for photos and for video, which I'm sure for some of the freelancers with us today will be a primary concern, particularly for people working within design fields. We will be covering those and touching on how that might impact the creative fields. So these are some consumer AI that you might have come into contact with. So on the top right, we have the ChatGPT logo. So that's for text. We've got Midjourney on the bottom left. That's the primary image generator, which functions out of a Discord channel. I saw on the Juno Freelance Hub that a designer had done a great talk on how you can use Midjourney and an introduction on that. So I'd recommend checking out that talk if that's of interest to you. More recently, we've got Runway at the top, which is on its third public iteration. Runway is text to video generating. So that was something that I looked into quite heavily as somebody who works within video. The kind of progress on Runway over the last few months has been absolutely wild. I think last year on Twitter, there was a viral clip of Will Smith eating some spaghetti, which looked like some kind of eldritch horror. And then this year we've seen stuff that looks like it could be out of a Hollywood feature film. So the kind of progress in the last 12 months has been astronomical. So kind of following that is quite important. And then two that I'm not seeing touched upon quite often, but are causing concern, are Google employing AI to their search engine. So on a different slide, I've got an example of how this will look, and it's just something to flag for if you're doing research. And then we've got Grammarly, which doesn't function as a traditional spell checker if you have their premium, and it's starting to kind of give generative prompting for how you can write, which might cause problems with some of the issues and ethical dilemmas that we're going to cover later in the talk. So these are how the kind of responses you might be used to look like from generative AI. So at the top, we've got me asking ChatGPT about what generative AI is, and that's the kind of text that it would generate back. On the right, we've got an image generated from a Midjourney prompt, which looks photorealistic. And at the bottom, we've got Google's new AI feature, which will scrape the internet and provide the answer that it thinks is most accurate for the question you are asking. So something I hear quite a lot is how to learn the tools because they're very new. Courses in it that are at an advanced level are quite rare or underdeveloped at the moment. This is rapidly changing. There are emerging courses coming out from kind of free webinars like this one and on the Juno Hub and with kind of the online universities. These will adapt with time. And I think the sooner you can get on this, the better. The best way to learn anything is to just get hands-on and use the tools yourself. It's all well and good kind of me telling you how to use it or somebody else, but it's adapting it to your workflow is something that I think only you can decide and experiment with. There are some things that I've seen used that aren't working for me in terms of doing spreadsheets and things. I find that easier to do still traditionally, just with how to move the prompts in and out of ChatGPT. But then there are other things that have worked better for me than for others. On the OpenAI page, which is kind of a separate link to ChatGPT, for those of you who don't know, OpenAI are the company who run ChatGPT behind the scenes. They have a kind of splash screen of prompt ideas that you can literally steal, and that will tell you kind of basics on how to speak with ChatGPT, because there are ways of getting responses that work better than asking it a traditional question. So as we can see on the right-hand side, there's things that relate to coding for anybody who might work in tech over here. There's one about spreadsheets, things about making lists, all sorts. I recommend you have a look at those. They are great. They will open up a ChatGPT text log that's already generated from these prompts, and it's great to kind of see how that all works behind the scenes. And then independent further research and reading is essential. Follow the topics on Twitter, follow what's trending on, Discord and Reddit. The community around AI is grown massively, as we can see by the people that have joined this talk. So I think the best way is to speak to each other. So what are the use cases for generative AI as kind of freelancers? Well, we've got things like content writing, which could be anything from an email to a social media post. And this will quickly help you get through your daily tasks of admin that you don't want to do. Client communication, we've got things like changing the tone of things. If you've written a very angry, strong-worded email and you're like, oh, maybe I should dial that back, you can ask ChatGPT to kind of rewrite your aggressive keyboard bashing email in a nice, pleasant tone, which is something that I found quite useful. And then for research, it's kind of like Google that you can talk to very quickly. But I will get onto some of the shortcomings with using AI for research purposes. So I have some case studies of how I've personally used it or I've seen other people using it. So these are some prompts that I might use in my day-to-day. So writing a cover letter, writing me a reply to an email, improving an email for clarity and conciseness if I know someone's busy and I want to get my point across. Or we can get very long prompts like this, which was when I had to schedule a day of filming as a production manager. And we had a very, very short turnaround for like hair and makeup and the amount of models. And I could have sat and worked down all the timings, but I just wanted to very quickly be able to say to the client in that meeting, okay, we need this model to turn up at this time. And I could get that back to them in 15 minutes rather than sitting with a spreadsheet for, maybe an hour, hour and a half. And particularly in what I do in short form content, time is really of the essence in turnaround. And the more time that we have to focus on the creative discussion, the better the end product I find is. So this is an example of how I used it with a client on a photo shoot recently. So they sent me details of kind of all these different outfits that they have and which models fit which outfits and a general kind of overview mood board of how they want the project to look. So they wanted groupings. And rather than sitting and scrolling through all of these kind of different colors and different outfits and who's who, and I don't know what the models look like yet, and all of this, I decided to use ChatGPT to very quickly just scrape all the colors that are the same together so that we could see very quickly on the page who would go well with who in a group shot. So initially I used it to arrange the data by color. Then we specified a request against what would look better against an orange backdrop. And I was very clear with my prompting to use color theory about which would go best against the orange, because if I'd have just said, sort them into groupings about what looks best together, it might not have provided exactly what the client were looking for. So using that extra kind of specification was key. You can do this with your writing as well. If you're kind of speaking to a general audience, you can specify the reading level for age. You can specify kind of how formal it can be. And this all just helps you having to do several re-edits or revisions. And then what I did is I just relayed this information to the client using ChatGPT to generate it into a spreadsheet. And then in under an hour from receiving that initial information, I could very quickly convey that across. And then we use this to collaborate on the creative end result on the day. I could very quickly get one of the runners to just say, okay, grab, Laura, grab Sunny, we're doing the beige. And then without them even being in costume, we knew that who was who and who was wearing what. So as I said, what would have taken away from my time to have creative discussions was made quicker by working with an AI tool. So all of this so far is really making AI sound as if it's our friend and it's amazing and it's what all of the AI hypers would tell you it is. But unfortunately, we are going to have to look at how AI can actually be a foe to freelancers. So ethical considerations. This is the key one that I am hearing from everybody online, in the news. If AI is capable of doing a job more efficiently and more cost effectively, why would a company opt to hire me, which would then threaten the job security that I have? Particularly as freelancers, where we work on a project-to-project basis, every job matters, and our schedule we need to keep running. And if people are not hiring freelancers, that's obviously a great concern. So I'm just going to dig a little bit deeper into kind of the job replacement. We're not quite seeing how this is going to impact us in the long run. If people are experimenting with the tools now, they might backpedal later when they see the results that they've got. And that's what I'm going to now cover. So these are the 3 issues that we are commonly seeing where clients are opting to use AI instead of freelancers, and why I believe and why people I've discussed with think that AI is not going to take all of our jobs. Firstly, we have this copyright issue. Earlier, I said that the large language models and the image generators are trained off of existing data sets from artists and freelancers and writers like ourselves using copyrighted material. Now, it's to yet be decided legally whether this falls under the copyright jurisdiction and legislation exists. And the New York Times have taken OpenAI to court in America, as about 30% of all of the training sets for ChatGPT use New York Times articles to get their information. So sometimes you will ask a prompt to ChatGPT and it will return an article from the New York Times that is majority just completely plagiarized from an existing article. Now, if you're working for a client and they want some copy generated, or the client generates it themselves instead of using a copywriter, they could then get into, plagiarism trouble or copyright trouble, and that is going to have a business impact legally. The same with image generation on Adobe. Recently, there was quite an uproar when Adobe changed their terms of service, and it wasn't quite clear if using Adobe, then the end products you get from it would be used to further train their data set. That was a concern for clients who are doing projects under NDA and whether that stuff could all leak early, depending on the prompts that are used, which is an emerging discussion. And more recently, Meta have updated their terms of service so that any post made on their social media platforms can be used to train Meta's AI that they are in development on. This is an ongoing discussion, as I've highlighted. It's not yet clear legally where this lands, but I think it's very key to be aware of this discussion, following how the jurisdictions might kind of come about. Because you don't want to find yourself caught out using it, and you kind of want to signal this to clients who might be saying, oh, just use ChatGPT. I think it's worth bringing it up as a concern, and that's kind of the copyright issue. Now, moving on to factual errors, we're seeing ChatGPT and the image generators, when asked to do something based on real life, do what are being kind of called hallucinations. Now, I think hallucination is a bad term. If I did something incorrectly, I would just be called wrong. So I think when you see anybody say, oh, ChatGPT is hallucinated, just know it's factually incorrect. It's not right, and you cannot trust it. We're seeing things like the relevancy being not what you've asked for. You could ask for a footballer in the mid-1900s to come about, and then it will pull a footballer name from a book on it that's made up and fictional. So if you're not specific enough, you might not get the relevant information that you need. And then the training data, as we said, it's open source training data. So you don't know where it's pulling these answers from. You don't know if you can trust it. The same way as when I was kind of back in school and my teachers were saying, you can't trust Wikipedia, you need to do your own research. I think we're falling into this idea that AI speaks to us like it's a human, therefore we can just trust it. And that's not always the case. So there's a case study that I've found where Air Canada had updated their chatbot and replaced humans trying to save money. But the chatbot was kind of stupid and wasn't trained properly. So Air Canada ended up having to pay damages to a client who had had incorrect results provided to them as a customer, which then caused them financial loss. And obviously that's really bad PR for Air Canada. They might have lost returning customers. They have had to backpedal on this whole system that they've paid for, when in actuality it would have been better to keep the existing staff that they had. And then finally, we've got the quality and consistency of output, particularly on image generation. A lot of designers work within brand specs with specific colors and font and type, and all of this. And with the image generators, no matter how specific you are with what you say and what you ask of the kind of software, you are never going to get that consistency of output unless you have only used that brand's material as training data. And even then, you're not going to have the kind of same consistency within the brand that it would have had if you'd employed a freelance team or an agency, and they had managed that throughout. So things you need to be mindful of as a freelancer with your own work and whether you're working under NDA is the policy updates for software and tools you might use that might be stealing your artwork for training. So this is the policy from Meta. You can opt out of this and you have a right to object to how your information is used. So if you work as an artist and you want to protect your art style in the public domain, I think looking into how you can opt out of this is very important. And then on Adobe's page, this caused the uproar where they said that they could scrape through your data that was uploaded to their cloud and do what they want with it. Now, it turned out that all of this social media backlash, which went absolutely massive on Twitter, might have all been for nothing, for naught, because the wording wasn't clear. As we can see, we've got a very angry Adam Ellis here telling Adobe to go and F themselves. Adobe clarified later that it isn't going to use this to train AI models or assume that the users own the work that's being done under NDA. But because they weren't sensitive to this emerging discussion, the damage to their PR had already been done. They had already lost subscribers. And I think it's very important working with freelancers to know that trust cannot be generated artificially. Your relationship to your clients is what makes you special as a freelancer and why they will keep coming back to you. And I think fostering that trust and that human side of the relationship is what will kind of keep the freelance world afloat throughout this kind of tumultuous time. So I think really fostering that side of the relationship and your unique work is why they chose to use you as a freelancer in the first place, and why I think that they will keep using freelancers and human artists and human creatives moving into the future. Another example we had on the kind of legal and business side was a lawyer in America, Stephen Schwartz, who was using ChatGPT to generate cases for a legal settlement and asking it to provide sources and references, which then turned out to be fake. However, he'd investigated this. He knew they weren't real, but his source for then kind of trying to back up that that was the case was ChatGPT. So we can see from the legal proceedings where he was then eventually sued, him asking, are the cases you provided fake? And ChatGPT is hallucinating, or alternatively lying, saying, yes, the legal data is real, you can find it here. And then Stephen not going and doing any further research. This then ended up with him getting sued, him losing money. So as freelancers working with business professionals, it's important to know where your liability is and how this could then reflect on you if you've not done adequate research. Now, my opinion is, it's very clear to say it's my opinion because it's a very emerging debate and there's no clear-cut way of doing it, that if you are having to go to the effort of rechecking all the sources that ChatGPT is generating, rechecking, reprompting, regenerating, going through all these rounds of feedback with clients on ChatGPT, it then is just quicker to do the work yourself as a human. And I think it's quite good to be able to signal that to a client who might be pushing for you to use it or opting to use it instead. It can end up costing them more using these new tools that are expensive to run. So I think that's where the human side will still play a factor. And ChatGPT tells you this itself. If you look at the very bottom, it says, ChatGPT can make mistakes. Please check important info. So like I said, if you're having to check the info anyway, you may as well just do it yourself. Now back to a photo I had on an earlier slide about these case studies with this legal trial between the New York Times and OpenAI. OpenAI are claiming that all this kind of idea around AI replacing jobs and kind of stealing the limelight is doomsday futurology, which essentially means that with any emerging technology that has ever happened, be it VCR, DVD, Spotify, things that have really kind of shifted an industry and caused disruption, that it's not always been the end. And we see throughout history that the people that embrace these tools, work with them, and are open to these discussions tend to kind of come out on the other side of it. Their workflow might have adjusted, work might never look the same again, but the work might still be there. So now this is my internal v external philosophy after all this research and how I feel towards AI. Consumer acceptance of AI generated content will shape the market dynamic, and we're seeing that there's negative social media reactions from artists and audiences. So on the right hand side, we've got an image from a film called Late Night with the Devil, which came out earlier this year. And if you read the reviews for that film, they are all kind of condoning the use of AI and how that's kind of impacting the film space, and saying that, you know, this is a low quality image that could have been done way better by an illustrator, probably cheaper, and it might have had an impact then on the box office from kind of lower review scores. So public use of AI will leave you open to its shortcomings. So this is the external. So we saw with Microsoft and their AI that it could generate racist responses or biased responses, and they've had to kind of go through a whole PR catastrophe to take down their AI and make public statements, which has affected their brand image. So I think this external use of AI that are all consumer facing and is going out publicly is where we will see the markets kind of shift back to how it's always been, find a kind of equilibrium where AI in its current uses might not be sustainable for all of the ethical considerations that we discussed earlier. However, those internal uses like emails, communications, things that aren't going wider to the general public will be where AI is used, and will be where I think that as a freelancer, it's not going to take away from your business. It's just going to make your life easier, simpler. And I think, like, if you're still working with kind of copywriters because you have that expectation of standard, there's still going to be a requirement for them. So establishing a framework for how this internal v external stance can apply will be key. We've seen the Writers Guild of America. So this is something I looked into as a film kind of worker. They went on strike last year, and part of the negotiations on striking was how AI will impact writers moving forward, because we're seeing text generation be quite a big use of AI. So the Writers Guild of America have come out and said that they're happy for AI to be used when writing a screenplay, as long as the client has proved it, but the client cannot require the writer to do so as a condition of employment. So I think if you have that stance on AI and you're working with clients, you know, it's up to you if you whether you want to use it, not for them to decide. AI can't be credited as an original writer under the union terms, because it's using existing text to generate something that is pulling from other sources. So the same way that if I did that as a writer, I would get kind of done for plagiarism. And then everybody must respect the developing legal and regulatory framework around the use of AI. Like I said, this isn't set in stone yet, but as soon as it is, you should adopt to that and follow it to the letter, because you do not want to get caught out. So the conclusions from this is, if you are using AI to augment your current workflow and how you're working, that is fundamentally your decision to make. I think then when you're looking at the external and you're putting things out to the public and you're saying, this is my work, I take credit for it, that's where you will get caught out eventually. I think then going back to kind of the quality debate, the tools are only going to improve with time. The arguments will shift. And I think if you are following the research, like I said, keeping engaged in this discussion, attending more talks like this, you will be able to have much better discussions with clients about how to keep yourself involved as a freelancer, how to protect your business interests, and move forward and adapt to these changing times. So now I'm going to close the PowerPoint and move on to the questions for the last 10 minutes, I believe we've got left, and kind of look at the discussions that we can have in the room today. If you'd like to contact me privately for further discussions, or to kind of pull from some of my resources that I've gathered and weren't put on the slides today. Feel free to email me at this link or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to have these further discussions and learn from you as well. So let me stop sharing.
Thank you, Lewis.
So if there's anything you want me to cover again, or you have any questions, feel free to turn on your mic or put it in the chat.
I think we already have one. I'm not sure if it was a raised hand or a clap, but if it was a raised hand, please feel free to ask. It might have been a clap. Feel free to use the chat also to type any questions. But also, oh yeah, Tim.
I'll go for one, Lewis, just because no one else has said anything yet. So if I guess just looking at the number of people on this call, there's going to be some people who maybe just dabble with ChatGPT. Some people might not have even opened ChatGPT. So where would you suggest someone starts? Because I think your advice was to get hands-on. And for many people, they don't even know the sandpit to play in, or even where the sandpit is probably. So what's your 101 on that?
So I think a really good place to start with learning the tools is anytime you find yourself having to ask a question about a task, how would I reach out to a new client, or somebody has emailed you? The easiest thing to do is to copy and paste an email that you have already and say, ChatGPT, please rewrite this to be better. That's a very basic prompt, and it might not generate a very good response, but you'll see what it's pulling out from your input, how it's adapting that, and how the kind of responses sound at a baseline level. What we're finding is that if you use a very baseline prompt with ChatGPT, it tends to use quite similar phrasing, quite similar word choices. It'll sound very repetitive. And the more you use it like that, the more you will kind of get a sense of how that looks. And then you don't want to then send that off, because other people who are aware of how ChatGPT sounds will notice that, they'll pick up on it. So it's then experimenting with it more, how you can make it sound more like yourself. And that's where looking at, forums for how people are prompting, going and looking up what's called prompt engineering is quite key. There are tools that are going out to the market now of existing prompts that exist. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, I'm afraid. But if you Google prompt engineering, you will see that people have created this whole field of ways to talk with the AI tools that don't sound very human, but will pull a response that you'd like. I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah, great advice for everyone. Thanks, Lewis. I know there's other questions, so I'll keep it short.
So I've seen a question about the copywriters. I think with copywriting, the thing that I find stands out within the advertising field is that human element of text. I sat on the tube earlier, and I've seen kind of these walls of text adverts that are very poorly written. And I think being able to turn up to a client meeting, show examples of a campaign that you have worked on, show the impact of that campaign, give the brand cold hard data and feeling that they can't deny in the room, make it electric for them, really show your potential, because people will want to invest in you if you show them what makes you special. And that's all you can try and do. If people are dead set on using these tools, they're going to use them. But I think saying to somebody, I can use it to augment this, bring an approach, we can have this discussion, and then I can use ChatGPT to get what you want. That's how you make yourself stand out and land work and kind of be on the front end of this wave. And then the other question from Jay, do I have any AI automation tools to make workflows less manual? The key one that I'm using at the moment actually is Midjourney for storyboarding. So previously I used a tool called Shot Deck, which shows examples of existing media. But it doesn't always convey to like a director of photography I'm working with exactly the shot I have in mind. So then being able to take that discussion to Midjourney and, potentially show them an image without having to go on a recce or go to location can work out well. And that's not replaced anybody's work, because I was already using a tool that existed online. So I think that kind of is a tool that you can use. There is some algorithm-based AI that can manage your schedule as a freelancer. They're not quite generative, but if you're thinking on the tool side, you can use that. If you work in coding, I believe there's Copilot that exists, which can work with your AI workflow and development. That's not something that I'm a specialist in, but I'm sure Juno, or online there are kind of discussions that further delve into that. We have about 5 more minutes if anybody would like to open up the discussion more.
Also, if anyone knows any good AI automation tools, use the chat to share. I've heard of one yesterday. I've actually seen a demo. It's in beta mode. It's called Tana. Looks really good. I will just leave the name there in case you want to check it out. It is a bit like Notion, but looks more minimalistic, but there is a touch of AI there as well. So please put your suggestions so that we can all start clicking and Googling, and maybe we'll come up with a really awesome list.
I have another suggestion. For those of you who have to do kind of slides or PowerPoints for pictures, there is a AI tool called Tome, which is Tome. You can type in a generic prompt for a PowerPoint, and it will then generate all of the slide titles for you, and then you can just kind of swap around the content if you really quickly need to make that.
Oh, we've got one more. Beautiful AI. Okay.
Death of the presentation designer. I mean, maybe, but if you have to establish a kind of, as I said, the consistency with the brand, there'll still be a need for generating a template, because these AIs are still going to generate something new and different every time. So if you're trying to get consistency, that's where that job will still be useful. On the film imagery side, what do you think? So to answer Sally's question, I think you need to speak with these AI tools as if you are speaking to a person that is very specialist in their field. So sometimes as directors, we can be quite lazy. We can go, just get like a shot of their face. But if you want to generate an image like that, you need to speak to it like it's you're speaking to a DOP and their team. You need to say, you need to know what the lens looks like. You need to know the composition you want. You need to be able to provide a reference that it might be able to pull from. And then by specifying, like a style, a composition, a lens, you will get a much more specific response. The more, the better, than just saying, show me a shot of 2 people in the cafe. In terms of biases in the training sets, that's something I know a lot of AI tools are looking to address, because we've seen things with like CV scrapers that are looking to hire people. There can be kind of gender or racial imbalance depending on what sets we use to train it. I believe in the mid-2010s, Amazon had a tool that scraped CVs, but they'd only used men's CVs to train it. So anytime a woman had submitted a CV and it's mentioned like women's sport as a hobby, it would rank it lower. So this is something that AI kind of manufacturers are very aware of, and how it can have real world implications, and actively addressing that. I have had some hands-on experience using AI tools to analyze documents. I find that it's kind of, the AI is almost doing a spot the difference because it's dumb. So if you only train it on data set saying, pull a car out of this image, let's say you show it an image and you say, is this a car? And the data set only ever had cars next to a traffic light. If the picture you'd put on it didn't have a traffic light in it, it would say it's not a car. So I find that it can be quite inaccurate, and I'd rather just do the data analysis myself. Where it is good for is summarizing text. If you want to condense something quickly, or say like, what's the tone in this, or give me some bullet points to read it quickly. But other than that, I've not been too hands-on with the data side.
Any other questions? I took a screenshot of the list of your suggestions, by the way, so I'll make a list and I will share it on our Slack. And if Canva allows me to edit it into a video, I'll also put it as an extra slide for everyone who hasn't been able to join live. They should be sorry. They could have asked their own question.
We've got 2 more minutes if there's a quick fire question that anybody wants to ask.
Are there any other AI? Is there any other AI related stuff, Lewis, that you're going to be working on or with? Or what do you think?
So I'm with the fashion brand that I did that promotion for, trying to work out a pre-production workflow that could speed up getting things out quickly, and using AI to augment this, and then giving them a framework for if I'm not available to hand that off to somebody else, and how the documentation for that might look. So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
We have one more question from Jay.
What do I see on the horizon for creatives? I think we'll see an explosion in very wacky concepts that people will be like, I'm seeing comments online that's like, AI could never generate this. So I think you'll see this kind of very absurdist sort of media coming out, especially as people are also able to use Mid-Journey to say, like, show me an elephant in Trafalgar Square, which is something you might not see in real life. You might then see people taking those inspirations and doing very strange and kooky collaborations. I believe we will have to wrap it up now. Yeah,
looks like all the questions have been answered, and I guess you know how to find Lewis if you want to. Oh, Tim, one more question. Yeah.
Hi, Tim.
Go for it, Tim, unless it was applause. I know that Google Meets is confusing. It always confuses the clap with the raised hands. They should change it.
That was exactly it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we can now officially clap. Whatever icon you use, we will know that this is applause for Lewis. But also applause for you. Thank you very much for joining, Lewis. Thank you very much, everyone, for spending this lunchtime with us. If you want to revisit, the video will be edited and published in the usual space as always. Connect with Lewis on LinkedIn if you wish for any further discussion, and hope to see you soon next week, perhaps at another round of Juno events. Thanks so much. Have a lovely afternoon, and bye-bye.